spin in here for a second, and now we're recording. So everyone should have a message, I think. So I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about Dallas and introduce him here. I started connecting with Dallas in, I think it was about April of 2017 when I first got into the industry. Dallas has quite a history in the cannabis industry. He operated within the MMAR, MMPR, ACMPR, and Cannabis Act regulated environments since 2008. He created and developed a specialized ag tech software platform, which enables cannabis companies to operate within regulatory compliance with focus on GMP planning execution to deliver compliant products to medical and rec markets. And so he was a designated producer from 2008 to 2013 under the MMAR. And here comes our little history of the regulations. And he conceived Cropsify alpha version to track nutrients and plant health. And then April 2013, he began a process and became the founder of GreenX Farms Limited, LP, which is now Alberta Craft, which is a licensed producer under the cannabis regulations. He planned, prepared, and submitted MMPR LP application and accepted by Health Canada in 2013. So he was at GreenX Farms. I'm going to kind of summarize the rest. Basically, what Dallas has told me is he just saw this need in the industry for this software package, and that was his passion, was to go ahead and develop it. And so I think it's a fantastic tool. I think really, like, in order to grow in this industry, it's really hard to track everything on paper, and ultimately to ensure that no balls get dropped. And so I think this could be, if you're looking at you're a part of a company or looking to start a company that you want to grow to a reasonably big size, even if it's a smaller size, this could be a tool that really helps you track everything that you are required to document, and then beyond as well, because the more data that you gather throughout your growing process, the more you can go back and look at things and determine where things went wrong or possibly where things went right. So without any more delays here, I'll let Dallas share his screen and we'll get started on the presentation.
Thank you.
Here's a little tip for everybody too there, because sometimes if you're doing these presentations and your screen is a little bit small, if you're on a computer, you can press F11. That'll give you the option to have a more full screen, and you'll open up your view to see the presentation a little better. So are you presenting?
Okay, let me know if you could see the screen.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, is it big enough for everybody?
Mm-hmm. Looks good to me,
okay.
Dallas.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so Cropsify is a seed to sale plus a whole bunch more, but today we're just going to focus on what your course is about. So in quality management through good documentation practices. And so you can do that on paper, or you could use a software platform like Cropsify. The objective with good documentation practices is to comply with the cannabis regulations and meet their GPP requirements. GPP is also a cousin of GMP, so good manufacturing practices, which is a standard that a lot of companies strive to meet in order to export products to international markets as well. There's also an EU GMP, which is a higher standard. But the whole objective is to ensure product safety and customer satisfaction. And there is a saying that goes, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So the whole point is to capture all your activities. So the elements of good production practices include your standard operating procedures. So everything operates on procedures that you lay out, and you present those, of course, to Health Canada. And when they audit you, they want to make sure that you're actually you're actually doing things according to what's written down, and your plan could change over time. So the standard operating procedures are like, it's your plan today, and then you find something that works better, you have to adapt those SOPs. There's requirements for record keeping for your premise, so maintaining your premise. All of the materials that go into production. Materials include anything and everything that you use in production. So everything from fertilizers all the way to your packages, storage containers, anything that really comes into contact with the product and there's a slight risk that it could contaminate. So there's traceability requirements back to all of your materials. Your equipment, you have to maintain your equipment because a lot of it does come into contact with the cannabis, and so there's validation, calibration, maintenance, and those sort of records need to be captured. Your batch or lot records. So batch or lot would be your group of plants. So a lot is put through production, starting from seed or clone, all the way through cultivation and post-production, and then into your dried flower, or you might be going further into processing and creating cannabis 2.0 products like edibles. So there's also a lot of destruction. As you probably know, that there's pruning every day and there's a ton of waste to deal with. Health Canada wants to know where every leaf goes. I mean, you just got to put it in a bag or a bin, weigh it, and destroy it, and just make a record of the destruction. Good documentation practices also has a requirement for data retention and reporting. So we'll go into that last. So your standard operating procedures, in order to manage your master plan, basically, there's version control. So as I mentioned, you might have a procedure today that could change. That means you have to make a new version of the SOP. So you have to document and actually you have to document what you're documenting. So it's really, really intricate, and it's just called version control. So you're saying, okay, we have this version and it's changed. The reason we've changed it goes into this other version. Once each version change, of course, if you're changing a procedure, part of the requirements for the regulatory requirements say that your quality assurance person has to ensure that your personnel are knowledgeable and proficient at your standard operating procedures. So there's a training element involved. So in order to meet a GPP or GMP standard, let me just kill my phone here. You need to track the training and validate that, yeah, I've completed training. If you have an audit, they come in and be like, are these people trained on this? You're like, look, yeah, they signed off, it's done. Deviations. A deviation is when you have a procedure and something happens and it changes. Or you have a procedure and you change it on purpose to get a better result. So you have either a planned deviation or just a random deviation. An observation would be a more detailed report of some issue that's found, including a deviation or a problem. So going into version control for your SOPs, this page is displaying a list. This is a list of our SOPs under here. And then the table down below is the change log for each SOP. So you would add a new SOP. And so if we look, I don't know if you could see this, you might have to focus, might have to squint a little bit. I apologize, it's hard to fit everything in tightly. So when you add a new SOP, it becomes a draft. And then you could see version 2 of this SOP has a draft, it was reviewed, and then it's accepted. And then we have a witness when it's accepted, and then the QIP has the final approval. So there's two people who do the review or acceptance and approval on the final draft. So there's a life cycle for this. Is the change control for version control. Then once you have an approved SOP, we go into training. So the SOP can be assigned to, so here's the SOPs that are being assigned to this group of personnel. And so our platform makes it easy to select a user group and multiple LPs and just assign training for multiple LPs to multiple people at once. So those people will all get an email with a link. They will review the SOPs, then they will log in. They will claim that they finished the training, and they will do an electronic signature to notify the QA, the quality assurance team, that they've completed the training. And then the final approval, so it'll be the training once it's complete. So Jenny Miller completed the training on this date, and then the QA will log in, and then the QA will do a final sign off saying that they this personnel has been trained. And then each new version of the SOP will require just an updated training. Once you get into production, then you'll make a reference to your SOP to complete the process. And an SOP is just a step-by-step guide. Like step 1, cut a clone. Step 2, dip it in root hormone. Step 3, just step-by-step, real easy to follow instructions. SOPs are really simple, actually. It's just it's a bit of work to develop them, and the team should develop the SOPs together, really. So you've got the grow team who does things a certain way. Quality assurance person comes together with the grow team, and you just work it out. And so once you have a plan and you're following your SOP, you would go into the system, and just to create a record of the activity, you create what we call a quality management, or QMS. Cropsify has a module called QMS, and it's Quality Management System. And so you create a QMS action. And so this is QMS action number 223. And the category for this action is a deviation, because we were doing something, we were following the SOP that we've selected here, and we have discovered, or we have a deviation we want to record. So we enter the details of the deviation. So there's a bunch of things that you can enter as far as the details go. This deviation, we're going to assign it to this person who's completing it. There's a start date. The status will just tell you when it's started, open, and closed, or completed. And then the main part of a deviation is these notes down here, which this is a planned deviation. The immediate action was that we changed the rooting hormone to a different brand. The outcome of the deviation was that roots appeared quicker in 3 days. The management's determination, so this would be the QAP probably writing in the determination. So it's a successful deviation. And so we would, there's some other comments, and we're resolving the deviation, setting the stop date, and then signing off that this action is complete.
And I'll just jump in there as well, because Dallas and I spoke about this, and what I've kind of what we've kind of put through this course is that there are requirements for the QAP to be the one to sign off on some things. So in this case, we kind of went through in module 1 that this could be something that your quality assurance associate could essentially work with the team and validate that this deviation was completed. Can you hear me, guys?
I hear you.
I got a little feedback happening here. That's why I'm asking. I got to turn my speakers away from my computer, I think. So, the point is that within the program, if you're a large company, the QAP won't be able to sign off on every deviation. But so long as the people who are able to sign off on it, which can be managed by the administration of this program within your company, you will create a user group. Is that correct, Dallas? That authorizes certain people to sign off on certain quality management actions?
Yeah, you could define your own user groups, and there's 2 users that sign off. So one of the 2 users has an authorization, a security clearance designation from Health Canada. So it's usually one of the managers.
Right, and there's certain activities such as destruction that it is a requirement that that group, one of them would have to be one to sign off. So that's a good feature.
Okay, so moving forward, we get into your premises, where we deal with sanitation, maintenance, and the environment. So sanitation, again, we're using a QMS action, except this time we're just changing the category to sanitation. And it's a room sterilization. We're using a different SOP for this action. So in this case, we're going to pull some critical material out of stock. So our QMS tool allows you to also create a relationship between your quality management activity and your critical materials that get used. And the reason we do that is so that we have traceability back to the materials that get used, and the event when it happens and who did it, and it's validated. So again, in this case, we don't require extra notes. We can just record the room sterilization. It's happening in this room. This room here, we've actually defined some room sections. So you get to define your facility however you set it up, whether it's sectioned off or not. And then when you're done, you will just same as the deviation. All the QMS actions work the same. So you would enter your stop date when it's finished, and then sign off.
And I want to jump in here again if you're done there, Dallas.
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of throw a little bit of light on to how useful this can be to a quality assurance team, because I've been in situations where, for instance, we failed due to mold count on a crop. And what happens is then you initiate a root cause analysis. So you try and determine why, right? Where did the problem go wrong? Actually, we had in the first module, we had a couple of students that answered a forum post with these types of, possible scenarios happening. And I mean, it could happen in the drawing room, right? But you would probably take that root cause analysis all the way back to the entire cultivation of that crop, including the pre-sanitation before that crop was planted in a room. And so it can take a lot of digging to find all this paperwork if you go with a paper system. But the nice thing is right here we see that this was grown in room V3, and we're looking for any sanitation record from room V3. So in this database, it would be quite easy to do a search and quickly pull, the required information to, do a thorough root cause analysis, say, for instance, on a problem that may occur down the road. So on top of the fact that this is a requirement from Health Canada, this can really help you do some investigating in the future.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
Oh. Okay. Maintenance. Maintenance can also be done through a QMS action with a different category. And looks like we got some alignment issues, but it's the same deal. You just set your category, So we have a bunch of different categories, and the categories all have their own types. You select your SOP and assign personnel. You can't quite see them there, but enter your comments. And so I checked all the fittings on the plumbing, and then I set my stop date and signed off, and it's done.
And I'm going to jump in here too, Dallas, because okay, this maintenance option, is this where we talk about
Premises maintenance.
right? And I was thinking back to the idea of setting up recurring maintenance events.
That comes later in the equipment. We have another tool for specifically just for equipment for that.
Okay, excellent. We'll talk
So
about
this could
that
be
then.
for maintaining other things, maybe mopping the floor even, or I don't know what else you would need related to QA. So your quality management person, your quality assurance person would be the person who gets the final say, basically, you should rely on to decide on what type of activities should be recorded.
Right.
And so going forward, so the environment in the premises, we can also, I'll just back up one. So there's some right here during the QMS action, we could also add a new environmental record at the same time. So this is a manual. This is a manual method to enter your environmental data. So we've got a bunch of different elements here you'll be familiar with. And there are systems out there that capture the data automatically using sensors, but we can integrate with a system like that if the system is compatible. But this is a manual method, so there's always a backup too. So if some sensors break or the system goes down, there's always a method to capture your environmental data. So you can enter all of the variables or just the few big ones like your pH, air temperature, nutrient temperature, and concentration, and your air CO2. We've also got an extra thing here for the health rating so that you can, over time, we want to plot all this data to a chart and check to see what's giving you a better health rating over time.
And
Critical materials.
I'll jump in again there too, because there's a lot of data that you collect throughout the grow cycle. You know, I think you're going to gather these parameters daily, and you're going to definitely feed, you know, maybe not daily, maybe every second day, every third day, maybe 10 times a day. It really depends on your setup. But this type of data can really be valuable in order to, you know, have continuous improvement in your facility. And if you have paper records, there's really no way to use this data to help you. I mean, it's really hard to analyze that type of thing, but there are software programs out there now that can analyze your data for you. If you collect it, then you can use it to improve. So you can just imagine how this would be useful to look back and see, you know, if CO2 at 1200 was really significantly better than CO2 at 800. And so, like, things like that, you know, I mean, it's a dream for me to have all the data in this format myself. So, like, definitely, you know, this is the types of things you guys can use this data for if you have it in the electronic form, like in a database.
Can I ask a couple?
Yes. So your critical materials are all purchased from a supply vendor. So your vendors should be qualified. So there's a vendor qualification. And that just ensures that you're going to get a consistent supply from them. That's always going to follow and meet your requirements, because if they're inconsistent, it could affect your outcomes. Like, let's say the pesticide concentration in one of the batches they give you is like way out of the range which you're expecting, and you use it expecting it to be in a range, you can be recalled. You can fail the lab test because of that. So that's just one example. So the critical materials are from your vendor, which gets qualified, and then there's a process to bring your critical materials in. So when you're bringing them in, you also have to make sure that when you receive them, they're what you've ordered, and the packaging, like the exterior packaging, might have contaminants, so they have to be cleaned, and then you want to be able to quarantine them when you bring them in, and then release them for usage. And when you use them, we're going to track where they're being used and create traceability, so that if you do have a bad pesticide, you can go all the way back to the vendor, or if the vendor contacts you and says, we have this bad batch, everything that you've used, check it, you can trace it forward as well. So you would enter your company, the supplier, into the system. So it's basic contact information, their contact address, and then you may have a questionnaire or some paperwork, some supporting documentation to qualify them, and then you would upload and keep electronic versions of your vendor qualification documents in the company's profile and file cabinet, so that it's all available and you never lose it. So the products that you are going to purchase from the supply vendors would be entered into your own product catalog before you purchase them. So you would add a new product and do some research and gather the documentation together on that product. And then once you're ready, you can create a purchase order to actually order it from the vendor. So when you receive it, you will add the new material into the system, and it will be quarantined to start with. And as I just explained, you would have your own control checks in place for however you're going to receive it, cleaning the pallet, unpackaging it. You would print labeling, so the system will assign an identification number to each batch of materials that come in, and then you could print off the labels from the system, and then you would label each bottle or each box so that when you go to use it in the future, you know that you're pulling from batch 178 or 177, because you may have multiple batches, and each batch could have a different certificate of analysis from the vendor. And so you need to keep track of batch 177 versus, let's say, batch 50 of the same product, because the bottles will look the same. So you need to label it, and you need to attach that identifier so that you know which certificate of analysis goes to which bottle, when you use it, to which lot and which product. So once you've gone through your control checks, you would release the product. And so the system will not let you use anything in quarantine. It's only going to let you select materials that are actually released into the system.
Great.
So when you go to use them, you recall from an earlier slide during the quality management action, the QMS action, we were doing sanitation and we pulled some soap out of inventory. So this table here shows us, David mentioned that you could actually go to the database and search for all of your sanitation events. And so I've got an example here of a table showing many sanitation quality. This is a list of our QMS actions. And so these are all of the different lots where we did sanitation. These are the rooms where we did the sanitation. And sometimes we did a quick cleanup, or we have two different types of a sanitation event. And then we have actually three types, the other type here. So each event has a start and stop date, a status. So these two are still open. Then we've got some comments here. And so this will be your database, so you can just go and reference and trace those materials back through the history logs.
Right, Dallas, and then back to the ID versus the lot ID. So the ID is the ID for the material you were discussing, whereas the lot ID is the ID for the batch.
No, actually, the lot ID is the group of plants.
Right.
The QMS action, we're looking at a quality management action table.
Oh, okay.
So this is the quality management action number 214.
Okay. And then how do we see in this action what material we used?
When we go, it's not showing in this table. It'll show it when we dive into the report.
Right.
You'll see when we go to use it here. So when we actually go to select soft soap, this is soft soap number ID 40.
Okay, right. Okay.
So when you use it, and then when we go to our critical materials list, it will show us all of the lots where number 40 was used as well.
Okay.
So there's other tables to give us that other data as well.
Okay, excellent, thanks.
Your equipment. So you bring in your equipment, similar to critical materials. You go to your qualified vendor, you order it, you bring it in, you install it. Some equipment will require calibration, and a lot of equipment requires maintenance. So an equipment event is similar to a quality management event where, so the equipment event happens in some room. You select your piece of equipment. You could select an SOP related to that. The SOP is optional in this case, but for this example, we were showing it with using an SOP. And this event type is a calibration event. So we have many different equipment event types. So calibration is just one in this example. We set our start date, and just want to make a side note that our quality management actions and our equipment events can be scheduled into the future, so that if you want to pre-plan out your maintenance schedule, you can set dates, you can set your schedules to the future, and then the system will notify you when that date arrives, and then you would complete that event when required. And when you complete the event, you would enter your end date, and it may or not be assigned to personnel, but then you could sign off when it's finished. You could also check the recurring box, which allows you to put your equipment event into a recurring sequence. So for example, if you have a piece of equipment that's on a timer, like a fogging machine for pest management, and it would run maybe once a day at night for 2 hours. And you would need to reload that equipment with some pesticide every week. So you could run a schedule for 1 week, load pesticide, and then set the timer, and we know that that fogger is going to run on a set schedule. And so we have traceability to how often the machine is running, and we have traceability to the pesticide that's getting applied every night automatically without having to enter that record every night.
Sounds good.
So the equipment event logs, this is just the table of the example that I just told you about. So this equipment is your fogger. The event name, I've got a few different event names here, but I've only used an SOP once on that one. So we've run it twice. This installation, we moved it to a different room. We've run it a number of times. and we put it onto a recurring frequency a few times, and we used pesticide in it almost every time.
What kind of a pesticide, Dallas, would you be referring to in this case? You have experience with that sort of thing? Like what's a recurring pesticide?
Oh, I forget the name of the one that they use in that machine, but you'd have to call the manufacturer and ask them what they want
I
to
think
put in there.
an example that I can think of is like if a company is growing in a really humid area, there might have powdery mildew issues, in which case they may look at sulfur burners, and I know those things can run on timers. So yeah, like you said, like you could create you know, document every day that you do it as a pesticide application, or you could you know, like you said, set this recurring one up, and you know that you run it, say maybe for the first 2 weeks of the cycle until you start to see, you know, bud development, then you maybe pull it out. So that saves you a lot of documents to create and also track, right? So that's I think just, you know, for a little perspective as to how I can envision using that feature for this particular you know, example.
Yeah, and that's the whole point we're trying to do, save time anywhere we can. Okay, and next sorry, was there someone trying to ask a question?
No, sorry. I was just thinking out loud. It's really nice to have that history of where the piece of equipment has been and how you've used it and how long it's been run in what space. Just looking back at that data wise, that's a treasure trove waiting to be mined for information over the course of a couple of years. You're gonna dial in and learn so much about that piece of equipment, having that history documented.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of uses for these databases, and I mean, databases are just so powerful. I mean, beyond spreadsheets. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yes, yes, they are. And our database engineer has 35 years experience, and we snagged him from Oracle. So the power in our database is enabled by a database expert, and I call him a Java Jedi as well, because he's a coding expert as well. Okay, so batch or lot records go into your production scheduling. So the life cycle of your lot. So from propagation all the way through your life cycle, post-production, through holding, testing, release, and then 2.0 products potentially into extraction and formulations.
And recalls.
Yes, and hopefully not, but you have to be prepared for that. But after you've got your products finished, then we're going to package those, label them, and then you sell and sales and distribution. We're going to that's the whole point, is to get the product out the door, and then hopefully you never have to bring it back, but you just have to be prepared for that possibility. So production scheduling allows you to track your plant forms through production phases. So Cropsify is set up to allow you the freedom to name your rooms however you want. But as we all know how plants grow, so the phases will be no surprise that we go from propagation through to vegetation through to bloom. You might call it flowering, but in Cropsify we call it bloom. And then we go to harvest, and then of course you'll dry, and then after you're finished drying, we're going to contain the bulk materials into some sort of a container. And then there's an optional phase to do curing. So you could turn curing off and just completely dry your materials, contain it, and move directly to holding if you want. But there's of course, curing creates a better product, in my opinion. And then holding is like a quarantine. It's a stage where you would hold the product until it's tested and passed before you finally release it for sale. So you'll notice that each phase has a start date. A next move date is just an estimation of how long you expect it to take. But then the end date is the actual date when you move to the next phase. So you'll see the end date always matches the next start date for the next phase. The plant form is tracked through its transformation from a clone to veg to bloom or flower plant, and then finally to drying or fresh, and then finally when it's moved to holding, it's finished drying, and that's when you have your finished product or your finished dried product.
Hey, can you go back there for a second, Dallas? So the other thing is the plant count on the right. I really love that because you know, this is a fairly simple example, but yeah, throughout that you may see a lot of changes. So you'll figure out, like here, you can figure out your success rate essentially, or your wastage, right? So this is another thing you might want to track. It's always good to know your numbers.
There's also another reason why you might have a different plant count in each phase is that let's say you take some plants and you split the lot, you split it up, and you might move half the lot to another room, or yeah, or if you're destroying some plants, or you might reserve a couple from others. So you can either split the lot up or destroy plants.
Okay, great, thanks.
So after harvest, we start tracking it by weight. Okay, so once we have our dried flower and it's in holding, then we would create a lab test record for that lot. And so this is, we're referencing limit number 1. So when you enter your lab results, the system will reference the limits that would be set by your QAP. So your quality assurance person will need to decide which standard to use. So there's a European pharmacopoeia or the US pharmacopoeia that will describe the tolerable limits for your different sections here for cannabinoids, microbiology, heavy metals, physical properties, and then there's also pesticides. So those are all the required tests. And so you'll create a record for your lab test. You'll take a sample. So we're recording when the sample is taken. There's the sample weight taken from a specific container. And then the lab where it's being sent to, when it's shipped out, and who shipped it. And so you'll get a certificate of analysis back from the lab, enter the data, the limits are checked against the limits set by the QA, and then if it passes, you can release the lot for sale.
Excellent. And then I was just going to jump in here so that you guys know we're going to cover product specifications and also a document called Schedule B from the regulations, or from the Food and Drug Act, actually, that is a list of the pharmacopoeia that we can use. It's very commonly just the USP or the European pharmacopoeia, but there is actually a list of 8 documents in Schedule B. So we'll go over that in the next module. You can look forward to that.
Okay. So after, once you have your materials in holding, you can start packaging it even before you have your lab results back, or you can wait until it's released. But the record-keeping platform will allow you to track materials through the packaging process, and it will include tracking your loss. So a loss in production is important. That has to be tracked. And what that means is that it's something that disappears, like evaporation or residue that gets stuck to equipment or containers and gets washed down the drain. So during the packaging process, you will go to your safe storage. You will sign contents out. You will bring them to your packaging processing room, or you might do it in the same room, but we validate the amount that arrives in the room. Hopefully it's the same number. Then we create our packages. And then during packaging, of course, you might be doing final trimming on some flour. And you can collect byproduct at that point and keep the shake in a separate bin. You might not create packages for all of the contents that were signed out. So you might return some to safe storage in bulk format. And you might also have waste if something gets spilled on the floor and you have to destroy it. Then a waste record will automatically be created for you at the end of the process. And so the sign-in or the check-in gets signed, and then when the process is complete, it gets signed again. So once it's packaged, you would sign off on the packages that get sealed. So once the packages are screwed shut or heat sealed, however you're doing it, there's an electronic signature for the packages, which make an attestation that the weight volume inside falls within 95 to 105% of the weight that's actually marked on the label, and that's a regulatory requirement. So, and then once you've finished the process, means you're cleaned up and you might be returning materials. So we've got zero waste, 2,000 grams being returned to the primary bin, and zero being zero byproduct. But we've created 1,005 gram packages, and they've been packaged and labeled. And then the attestation goes into the cannabis regulations, part 5, GPP, part 7 of packaging and labeling. So this attestation has been reviewed by Health Canada. They've accepted this, and with the electronic signatures on the sign-off. So again, here we're using the QAP as the final signature. And again, we're using the 4 eyes principle, where 2 users have to sign off. So this is our generic or default label. The system will grab all of the data from Cropsify, assemble all of your the elements that are required to go onto your label, including generating your barcode for you. So there's no chance of human error when assembling all the data required to print your labels. The size and the design can be changed to whatever meets your branding. So this is just our generic default. So when you sell your product, the system has a sales module which will allow you to track the customer, where it's going to, where it's been shipped, and then here's the product, the lot number, and the plant form. The final cannabis product is flower buds. We sent 600 5-gram packs. So now we have traceability to where it's being distributed. We're also calculating the duties for you. So the cannabis duties are very complex. Our platform does that for you. The customer will get an email with an attachment saying that they're going to receive product soon, and with an attached invoice. And then hopefully this doesn't happen, but this is how a recall could happen. You would just find your lot. So you would select the lot and click on recall. And then another window will come up where you have to enter the reason for the recall. And then you can compose an email, which the email will get sent to everybody, all of your customers who made a purchase from that lot. And so the details of the recall will also include a risk classification and a communication and remediation strategy. This part doesn't get shared in the email. This is just part of the regulatory requirements to record that information for a recall. The email is the instant notification to your client list, but you can also print out your client list and follow up with a phone call or another email to organize a replacement or a refund, or however you want to satisfy the client for that recall. Okay, so for destruction, we go into the removal. We remove and destroy. So there's a two-step process: remove, destroy. In between, you could hang on to your removed materials for a period of time and then destroy it later. So that's why it's a two-step process. You have to record the weight at each step as well. There's the plant count and the method you're using, and then there's two witnesses that need to sign off on the destruction. So the waste record happens by creating the waste record. So the removal information includes the plant form, the room where it's removed. If there's a storage bin, that would be here, but this is removed from the growth cycle. So there's a removal date, a removal weight, and then a destroyed date and a destroyed weight, followed by your destruction method, the reason for the destruction, and you may or may not be destroying whole plants. If you're only destroying pruning waste, then you would have a 0 plant count, but you'd still have the weight for your pruning waste. And then we've got our signatures that happen for the removal first, and then the destruction second. So we're recording the dates, weights, plant form, plant count, the room or area where it's being destroyed, the destruction method, and then getting the dual signatures. And again, the electronic signature has an attestation attached to it that makes a reference to the cannabis regulations. So it's required to make this attestation referencing where and part of the regulations that you're following to complete the destruction. And again, this is Health Canada reviewed and accepted. There's also a print version of the destruction record for if you wanted to print out a sheet for your paper archives as well. So finally, the good documentation practices go into retention, reporting, and data corrections. So here we've got a list of all the various reports that our platform can generate. So part of retention is retaining your documents for a period of time. However, the database gives you an electronic permanent record. The cannabis regulations for most records, there's a 2-year retention period. So if they ask you for information from 2 years ago, you need to be able to dig that up quickly, where the electronic records allow you to just go in, do a search, and you've got it almost instant. So those reports can be generated at any time during an audit, or you'll be required to generate specific reports every month. So there's a cannabis report and the Canada Revenue Agency B300 excise report.
Yeah, that I'm actually manually doing this week, so that's one of my fun duties. I wish my program did that.
So yeah, you'll have to talk to the executive team there and get them on board. So data corrections, we're prepared to do that as well. We need to record how the data is changed, because even though we do have a 4 eyes principle, so that you have 2 users that validate the data, and usually data is entered correctly because you have 2 people who are managing the data entry. But of course, errors do happen, and so if you need us to intervene on a data correction, then we have support staff that you would send in a request to have something corrected. And so you can create a record of that data correction through a tool that we've created here for Quick Notes, or you could use our support portal. We have a ticketing system, which actually this tool here will just forward this notification to our support portal. So we've tied those together. And so that concludes our presentation. Quality assurance begins and ends with good manufacturing practices and requires record keeping is maintained on a regular basis. Utilizing a record keeping platform to help maintain up-to-date information about what happens in your facility will save time and ensure timely audits and regulatory compliance. And so I will stop there. And of course, if you want to follow up with me, you can contact me through info@cropsify or dallas@cropsify.com, or go to the website to see more information there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dallas. And we basically nailed the 1 hour on the nose there. We started a little late, so that was great. We've got, let me see who we have